Ferguson, Missouri, 2014. Police officers shoot and kill 18-year-old Michael Brown after confronting him over a report of shoplifting. Mike Brown! His death catalyzed mass protests, and people were shocked
You need to disperse immediately
to see what looked like a full army descending on Ferguson in response.
Those lawful, peaceful protesters did not deserve to be treated like enemy combatants.
With heavily armed police in tactical gear, carrying assault rifles, grenade launchers, and tear gas, both during riots and peaceful protests.
The local police met the protesters with this massive show of force, including a sniper who was mounted on top of an armored personnel carrier and was pointing his gun at the protesters.
Radley Balco, investigative journalist and author of the book Rise of the Warrior Cop, says the ensuing clashes between police and protesters shocked military veterans.
They were outraged. Said, if we did that to suspected terror cells in Afghanistan and Iraq, we'd be court-martialed.
The weapons in these videos are often called military style or military grade. They're not official or legal terms, but generally refer to weapons with military weapon-inspired appearances and caliber, or ones that meet military standards, respectively. Some gun rights advocates even characterize them as marketing terms. But the Ferguson clashes ignited public debate. Do police need these types of weapons?
Yeah, absolutely, in certain situations.
Gary McCarthy served as superintendent of the Chicago Police Department for over 3 years. He says military-style weapons are not necessary for patrol, but the equipment can be crucial in protecting the lives of officers in high-risk situations.
There are circumstances where we have to extract people from live fire zones. You need an armored vehicle to actually do that. And there's going to be times where our SWAT units are going to have to go into a house and conduct a raid where there are shots being fired.
But as headlines show, there is criticism about small departments across the country acquiring helicopters, MRAPs, and other tactical vehicles originally designed for the battlefield, like Dundee, Michigan, which got an AMRAP in 2014. At the time, the population was just 3,900. And in 2012, Balco says some residents of Keene, New Hampshire were shocked to see this SWAT vehicle turn up on city streets, questioning whether the city of roughly 23,000 people needed an armored tactical vehicle.
I remember interviewing this woman, and she said, I thought about, do I want to wake up in the morning and look out my, kitchen window and see a piece of military equipment there? Is that the kind of town that I want to live in?
But Balco agrees there is a role for some military-grade equipment, like protective gear.
It's about keeping that role limited to when that type of gear is appropriate, and about ensuring that we protect this idea that police officers are guardians, not warriors.
Police use of military-grade equipment dates back to the 70s, but Balco says it accelerated after 9/11. The Pentagon had already been distributing free surplus military-grade equipment, plus shipping and handling, to police departments under its 1033 program, which still exists today. But after the terror attacks, the Department of Homeland Security created anti-terror grants for police to buy brand new military-grade equipment, from armored trucks to ballistics gear.
Departments all across the country, from Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, to Boise, Idaho, to tiny towns in Texas, get these grants. This is new stuff. So you've created an industry that exists solely to create this new equipment in exchange for these DHS checks.
And since 1033's inception almost 30 years ago, the government says it's sent over $7.5 billion worth of equipment to nearly 9,000 law enforcement agencies. Most items are extra coffee makers, boots, first aid kits, or even sleeping bags. But according to Balco, they also include heavy machinery.
Helicopters, guns, grenade launchers, bayonets, that sort of thing. A lot of it's been camouflage or BDU, battle dress uniforms, the military isn't using anymore.
Certain machines and weapons are banned, like tanks, fighting vehicles, certain large caliber weapons, and explosives. Training resources for any equipment sold under the 1033 program is only available by request. Balco and other critics fear the combination of the weapons and a potential lack of proper training creates a warrior mindset.
It's not just about the stuff. Is that when you dress a police officer in camouflage, you make him think he's a soldier. You at least sort of create the image of a soldier. And that affects both how the officer sees his own job and also how the community sees that officer.
In a 2017 study of 1033 transfers and police killings, researchers found departments that received this equipment also saw an uptick in police shootings of civilians and other violence. They also found that police shootings of dogs increased, suggesting that the uptick wasn't explained by departments predicting and then confronting a rise in violent crime. They noted in psychology, this is known as the law of the instrument, where having a certain tool makes it more likely that you'll use the tool, even if better ones are available. Those like Gary McCarthy, who've spent decades on the force, intimately understand the pressures that take hold while patrolling the streets.
You know, it's a dangerous world out there. I don't know if you've ever been so scared that you couldn't breathe, but sometimes it happens to police officers. Why is it reasonable to have military-grade weapons, assault rifles, in the hands of civilians, and then say that maybe the police shouldn't have them?
Again, there's no universal definition of what makes a military-style or assault-style rifle, but odds are if you're trying to picture one, you're picturing the AR-15 or weapons inspired by it. It's one of the most popular styles of rifle in America. Research from the Violence Policy Center found over a 2-year period, 1 in 5 law enforcement officers who died in the line of duty were killed by an assault weapon. As of 2020, the industry trade group, the National Shooting Sports Foundation, finds there were about 20 million AR-15 style weapons across the country. That includes weapons owned by police and civilians.
It's true that there are a lot more types of guns that are used in the murder of police officers tend to be small caliber handguns. So it's not as if, police officers are being gunned down because they don't have the kind of, firepower they need to keep up with criminals.
Critics of arming police with military weapons say there are situations in which they're useful.
SWAT teams are a good example. So SWAT teams are heavily armed, and there are, a limited number of situations where I think even a critic of SWAT teams like me thinks that kind of force is appropriate. And that's when you're using overwhelming force and violence to diffuse an already violent situation.
SWAT was created with the intention of having a highly specialized and highly militarized unit to respond to emergencies like active shooters or hostage situations. That means using military-style equipment from flashbang grenades to assault rifles, often acquired through the 1033 program grants or police department budgets. But in a year-long study, the ACLU found just 7% of all SWAT raids were executed for active shooters, hostage takers, or barricade scenarios. Nearly 80% of deployments were used to serve search warrants, mostly for drug searches of people suspected of crimes. And as headlines show, police or SWAT raids involving military-style equipment ended in unintended deaths or debilitating injuries, including children and pets.
Now using it against somebody who is just merely still suspected, not even, charged with committing a low-level consensual drug crime. Where before you were using overwhelming force and violence to diffuse an already violent situation, now you're creating violence and risk and volatility where there was none before.
When asked about cases about mistaken raids, McCarthy says, humans are fallible.
The information that we act on comes from generally confidential informants. We're talking about civilians. Humans make mistakes. Sometimes they're going to give us the wrong opinion. And there are steps that we take when we get search warrants.
To leave behind the warrior and embrace the guardian mindset, experts like McCarthy and Tyrone Campbell, a trainer at Denver Police Academy, say it's imperative for police to build trust within their communities.
Easiest one is called contact theory, which is when have you ever spent time with somebody who's different than you, somebody who doesn't look like you, doesn't believe like you, doesn't think like you, different socioeconomic class.
Researchers say part of building that trust is being transparent with the public about how police use tactical military equipment. The Project on Government Oversight, which describes itself as a nonpartisan, independent watchdog, suggested Congress create specific policies and protocols for the training, use, and record-keeping of military-grade equipment. And McCarthy says officers who abuse the equipment and their power need to be held accountable.
Mistakes are made. And when they are made, we have to make sure that we're taking measures to try and prevent mistakes from happening in all things that we do.
Jamal Andrus, Scripps News.